Well, joining us now in the studio to discuss this report further is Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. And on the phone line, we're joined by Tendai Biza, the Executive Office Administrator at People Against Suffering, Oppression and Poverty, or BASOP for short. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Mr. Vavi, just your thoughts, first of all, on this inequality report. I mean, what is your reaction to the fact that we're listed amongst one of the most unequal countries in the whole world?
No. We're actually the most unequal society in the world. And we have been for some time now. Before 1994, you could make that statement. We're amongst the most unequal society, but we now the leading society in terms of inequalities. We have outpaced Namibia. We have outrun the Central Republic of Africa. We are the most unequal society. Our Gini coefficients have deteriorated to 0.68 according to the Statistics South Africa. And I now see that the Human Rights Commission, if my memory serves me well, says we are at 0.69. Now that's quite frightening. And when they go into some detail to look at these inequalities, you can see both the background of apartheid and colonialism still playing itself out in the 24 years of democracy in South Africa today. In this way, black people remain the face of poverty, of unemployment, of inequalities, of degradation, of humiliation, and they will remain the face of crime, of the population in prison, and of the people who are being sentenced the longest in prison by the courts. And the women remains the people who bear the brunt of those inequalities, poverty, and young people in particular, the Africans remain the face of that unemployment, poverty, and inequalities, which is something that we should not be celebrating. If this is not a total failure on the part of the government, then please take me back to school to learn again what is the meaning of failure.
Now, Mr. Biza, just join this conversation and talk to us about your reaction and what you think are those key elements that actually contribute to our country currently being the most unequal right now in the world.
Okay, what we have noticed is, let me just start by saying, according to the statistics which we have seen from IFA, Institute for African Alternatives, which was a conference which was done in 2017, it shows that millions of people, they cannot even afford to buy decent food or even housing and other incentives. And, you know, this is why we also, and also the National Economic Dynamics Studies also showed that 29% of people are also trapped in the severe poverty. And over for the past few years more than 3 million people, they even joined the ranks of this poverty impoverished people. So it also shows that with that there is sort of the rural population which is also living below the poverty line, and with that we have also seen that with the influx of the rural urban migration population, and also it also constrains the limitation of urban resources, forcing people to live in poverty, especially the women and children. That's what we have also noticed, that with the forcing of people coming to urban areas, it was also caused a lot of poverty, especially to the women and children. And also we also find that there is also lack of jobs, and also health institutions, they also become also not up to date, or I can say they are also constrained among other things. We can only say jobs but also schools, and it also shows that everything is also constrained because of this.
Now, Mr. Vavi, the VAT increase that we experienced this year is one of the factors that was mentioned in the Human Rights Commission report. And according to them, they feel that the poor people are the ones who are going to be bearing the brunt the most of that VAT increment. What do you think about that, and how can we mitigate this VAT problem?
I like more what they said, that the VAT increase was a constitutionally suspect, meaning that it may not pass the test of a constitutionality in the country. I think that's something that people like ourselves in the trade union movement and the rest of the civil society or progressive formations fighting for a just society is something that we must explore further. We are convening a working class summit of many organizations, hopefully over 140 of them or so, on the 21st and 22nd in Soweto. I'm sure many people are going to take up that comment made by the Human Rights Commission. Constitutionally suspect because it is so unfair. They confirm what we all know, that the VAT is a regressive tax. It affects the poor more than it will ever affect or impact on the lives of the rich and the well-to-do in society. And VAT oppresses the already oppressed. It puts their situation even in greater dire straits. The reason why we think that it was so unfair is because it was yet another strategy, yet another message communicated to society as a whole, that our government listen more to the rating agencies, to the guys in Washington and New York who draw the rules of the game from thousands of kilometers away, and which our guys in the developing world are unfortunately adopting the approach of Tina. There is no alternative. Let's beat ourselves before the bully can arrive, and let's comply with all of the rating agencies' rules. And these rules say, tax your people more, increase the VAT, but continue to decrease the levels of corporate taxes, decrease the levels of the personal income taxes, and make the burden of paying taxes lighter on those that are rich, but increase the burden on those that are poor, because of this mistaken belief that only the 1% that controls the economy can grow the economy and help with the crisis of unemployment. Something that have been proven so incorrect in South Africa. Let's look at the statistics. We are told that just before 1994, corporate taxes were at around 45% in our country. They have been driven down to around 28%. The GEAR and the NDP target says they must be at around 26%. They're almost reaching that target. But they're now doing the unthinkable. They are saying to the poor, we've messed up the economy. We have driven the state-owned enterprises to their knees. They are now at the door of bankruptcy, but it is going to have to be the poor that cleans the mess. And the rich are going to sit there idling and looking for the next levels of high levels of profit. Two important reports that came up in the recent week supplement the report of the Human Rights Commission. Yesterday or so, there was a report published by the PwC, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, that say that the biggest companies listed in the JSE are paying 24.9 million rands annually to their CEOs. And a report 2 weeks ago from some pay measurement of I can't remember the name now, was saying that actually the wages, the take-home pay of ordinary workers in the country continues to decrease. And that's why we are seeing these income inequalities and the wealth gap widening all the time in our country. And unfortunately, that remains the status quo, because I think that at the policy level, our policies are geared towards serving the interest of the powerful and whilst using the poor, the workers, as a stepping ladder, basically, for the rich to get even much more richer.
And I think these inequalities are actually what's driving a lot of these wage protests that we've seen this year. Now, Ms. Biza, just talking about this labour market segregation, do you think that some of the private, or the private sector rather, is to blame for not being involved in trying to transform labour segregation, whether it's through race or through gender, and even through salaries?
That the income is divided and it's growing every day, and the richer are getting richer and the poorer are getting poorer. If you can see, like recently we have noticed with the moving of the trains, the poor people are the ones who usually use the trains, and the trains are not on time. And those poor people are the ones who are using the trains to go to work. And when they get to work, they are 1 hour or 2 hours late to work, and they are also deducted on that little money which they are getting. It is also deducted from that, because they were not on time to be at work. So it shows that these people are going to be continue to be poorer because of, or maybe the mode of transport which they are also using, it is not also reliable. So we don't know how best can we start making things all right, starting from maybe the transport, or maybe if they can have houses near their workplaces so that it can be a walking distance, and also it will also save time for the poor people, and also it saves money for the poor people. Most of the poor people, they use a taxi to go to the train station. Then from the train station, they use a train to go maybe to an area like here in Cape Town. Then after that, they also use a taxi to go maybe to an area to maybe Greenpoint, Sea Point or so. So it shows that also with the money, the little money which they are getting, it is also, they are also using it on mostly on the transport issues. So this is why I also see these people, they will also become poorer and poorer, and at the same time they'll be working for the transport, and they don't have even any way to get money to compensate them on transport.
And I think even
with rent, if they are to look for a house which is nearby, they can't even afford the rent because the rents are too expensive.
I think also even with the increase of petrol every single month, petrol going up, the cost of living is going up even higher, than people's salaries can actually manage to keep up. Just in response to what you were saying, can you also address the issue of the fact that the world has reached an unsustainable level of inequality, where you mentioned, I think earlier on, that 1% of the entire world population controls more wealth than 99% of the world's population. Do you think that perhaps we should have a global approach to dealing with inequality, maybe?
Absolutely. But there was an important issue that you were raising about the slow pace of transformation in the private sector, which is actually behind the reason why we are unable to defeat the levels of inequalities in society, despite all of the attempts by government. For example, look at the situation. Government inherits an economy that, of course, was giving us the picture broadly we're speaking about today. We can beat the government for failure to address that. They inherited this from apartheid and the colonial era. At that time, the government was spending 2% of its budget on the social security, on social grants and pension. It has increased that to 9% over a period. And yet, and it meant that basically 17 million, just to conclude that point, 17 million South Africans now receive some kind of support, pension, social grant, child grant, disability grant, those type of things from the government. Just close your eyes for a minute and imagine if there was no such an intervention, what we will be talking about here in terms of the levels of poverty in this economy. And the main people to blame there is that the private sector continues to cling on to the past. They are refusing to transform. The Human Rights Commission report says so. They are refusing to even implement the existing legislation, such as the employment equity. Just look at the report that was issued earlier in July. It said the following, that in the public sector, 72% of all senior managerial positions are held by black people. In the private sector, 71% of all the senior managerial positions are held by white. But if you look at the lowest ranks in the economy, the opposite then happens. In the private sector, 83% of all the people who are unskilled and who are doing those repetitive, low-paying jobs are black people. In the public sector, it is the opposite, that only 11% of white are doing those type of jobs. Now, that's the crux of the problem. We have not transformed the private sector. That's where the actual face of white domination of society is playing itself in. That's where all of the ills we inherited from the apartheid continues to play themselves out 24 years into democracy. Now, once you have that situation in the private sector, which controls 70–80% of all the wealth, then you must know that we're going to continue to read the reports that are like this until we have a government that have guts and the political will to transform this economy and to make sure that black people, not the black elites, black people are brought into the economy forcefully. The crisis of their landlessness, the crisis of their property-less is being addressed radically. That's when we will begin to talk about radical economic transformation. For now, there is no radical economic transformation on the table at all. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the Human Rights Commission report is mistakenly saying this is about advancing radical economic transformation. It doesn't exist. What we are going through is the worst kinds of austerity measures and neoliberal programs that will always keep the poor very poor and the rich very rich.
Well, thank you very much to you, Mr. Vavi, and to you, Ms. Biza, for joining us this evening to converse about this high levels of inequality. And to our viewers at home, if you want to give us your comments and your contributions, you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @AfroWorldView. It is time now for a short break. We're back after that, so do stay with us.